But is today's security good enough for tomorrow?
Clearly, no.
The aggregator is the blood flowing to our veins.
Perhaps the set-top box is dead, but to be replaced by streamers.
Legacy always lasts longer than you think it will.
Drive customer experiences and create new opportunities for carriers to engage with their customers.
Open and free does not mean easy.
The network is like a living organism.
If I give you $100 million, what would you do with it?
Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this 8:50 session. I hope you all have a coffee with you. I see, yes, there is coffee. That's great. By the way, the one sitting on this side, we don't have a lot of slides, so if you are interested to see us, it's probably better you move on this side. Welcome here to Connecting the Dots, day 3 of our session. We have in total 9. Connecting the Dots is about working with innovators, thought leaders, game changers of this industry, leading operators and vendors who share their tips, insights, and learnings. That's what these 9 panels that we organized here are all about. My name is Andy Waltenspiel. I'm running a Munich, Germany-based consultancy, and I work with some of the leading vendors and operators such as Deutsche Telekom or Vodafone on some of the topics that define the future. Today, very excited to be here. Thank you, good to see you. Great to see you. So before we jump in, Jim, you need to get really close to the microphone.
Okay.
So otherwise they don't hear us. So please give a few words on yourself and Velocix.
Okay, Jim Brickmeyer. I'm CEO of Velocix. Been in the streaming industry, if you'd believe it, for 20 years. It's hard to believe streaming started that long ago, but quite a long time ago. Velocix, if you're not familiar with us, is a pure-play streaming technology company. We focus on software solutions, carrier-grade kinds of software solutions for telco operators, cable operators, broadcasters, and other kinds of video streaming companies. We offer things like CDN, origin servers, cloud DVR stuff, dynamic ad insertion technology, and so on. Everything about streaming, and we are based in Cambridge in the UK, but a global company, and have a good set of customers, as you can see by the list up there. We tend to primarily carry things like video traffic, video streaming traffic, and deliver IPTV and other sorts of services over our technology. And
well, the headquarters in the UK, but you're based in the US.
That's right. Yeah, based in Atlanta. One of the big cable cities in the US.
Great. So, topic today: video streaming efficiency, and we're going to talk about some of the key technology drivers. Why is efficiency so important?
Yeah, it's interesting because right now efficiency is becoming a big topic. I mean, we see a developing energy crisis in Europe. We've got different kinds of climate change things happening in the western part of the U.S., where we're seeing water dry up, which tends to be a power source for a lot of cities, a lot of places. And we've got inflationary concerns that are happening around the world in the economies. And so what we're starting to see is that a lot of the companies that we work with have begun to see efficiency as a key area for them of how do you survive, how do you thrive amidst some of the changing environments. And we even see like some things like some of the customers that we work with saying they're even going to go as far as raising the temperature in their data centers in an effort to try to reduce the amount of consumption, power consumption, and reduce the CO2 emissions, which is indicative, I think, of what's ahead of us, right? And a lot more focus on efficiency as time is moving forward. And by the way, CDN technologies are really designed. They are efficiency technologies, so it's one of the right places to focus.
And do you see the similar trend? You mentioned the US and you mentioned also Europe. Who's a forerunner in this? Is it a lot driven by Europe? Or?
Yeah, I would say Europe. It tends to be. We start to hear various governments in Europe starting to talk about streaming, in particular during the pandemic. a lot of stuff happened where, everybody was streaming, right? And it created this huge amount of demand. I think there's a lot of discussion right now about what are the costs associated with delivering a stream. Like you think typically when you think of eco topics, they're talking about vehicles or they're talking about factories or things like that. And streaming has a cost to it as well, right? If you really look at all of the things that we're doing here at this kind of show, building up networks, fiber to the home, DOCSIS, and so on, all of that stuff is really driven by the desire of consumers to watch streaming video. I mean, the bulk of the traffic that's traversing those networks is streaming video. And the projection is that this is going to continue, right? Today we're doing HD content mostly, but 4K, more 4K content is coming, 8K content and beyond. And the demand is only growing. So the point is we got to focus on it now because the impact of delivering streams is actually fairly significant as you start to scale it out to the massive levels that we're talking about.
So that's efficiency on the energy level. What about efficiency and cost?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I think that the two go hand in hand a little bit. We also talk about it when we talk about efficiency. We talk about quality as well. In particular, when we start to look at a lot of these organizations that run video streaming businesses, they're looking to reduce cost, and part of that is the efficiency within the network, but part is the efficiency of the organizations themselves. So, doing more with fewer people. And how do you do that? Well, ultimately the technology that you build has to be simplified and it has to be easy to manage and it has to stay up. One of the customers we talked to said, it should be like a light switch. When you walk into a room, you're not surprised when the light comes on. You don't feel surprised that the light went on. And streaming technology needs to be the same way, as does all of the ad insertion tech and other sorts of things that go into it. And so this is where, focusing on, what we call carrier grade, but really, resilient kinds of architectures with geo-redundancy and cloud-based failover and those kinds of things become really important moving forward to try to streamline things, make them much more resilient and fault-proof.
So how far are we from the light switch vision today?
Yeah,
still a way to go?
It depends on what you've deployed. I think from the streaming perspective, from a streaming perspective, it's pretty consistent. Like I think you can get that kind of reliability. The challenge comes in when you start to add some of the newer technologies and in making sure the end-to-end integration of those ecosystems. So when we're talking about ultra-low latency, you're decreasing the amount of buffer space that you are maintaining. And so, you have to be very careful to make sure that you don't introduce quality issues in pursuit of a very low latency kind of a stream. Or if you're introducing ad tech, it's like, okay, the more dynamic your advertising technology is, the more potential issues there are. It's very time sensitive in terms of passing information around the advertising back and forth. And so those are things where there's still work being done to refine that and make sure it's very resilient and that you get the kind of performance that a carrier would expect to deliver to a customer.
Okay, so that's, we're talking about, you have one CDN, but we've just come back from IBC in Amsterdam a week ago. So there I see, if I look here in my notes, you have been in the news even in connection with multi-CDN. So what is that? Does it mean I have several Velocix CDNs or maybe a Cinemedia and a Velocix? So why is that important? What is it?
Sure. So what we see typically when we talk with operators is that natively they tend to have their own CDNs in place to carry their IPTV traffic, their own traffic, because that tends to be the least expensive way to deliver video traffic. There's a desire on the part of a lot of operators to move some parts of their workflow into the cloud, because the perception is that you're going to get much better scalability. It's on demand. You get it when you need it if you have peaks in traffic. And the hope is that you can get some efficiencies or some economies. as you move into the cloud. The challenge for something like streaming, however, is that it's very heavy data payload. And so when you move that into the cloud, what you find is that while certain kinds of database applications and other sorts of things are perfectly suited for the cloud, video streaming tends to get expensive, especially when you're talking about live video. It gets very expensive when you start to put it into the cloud. So the challenge for many operators is trying to figure out, okay, how do I balance the need for flexibility, the need to extend the reach of the system to perhaps folks that are not connected to my own private network? How do I get some resiliency and backup capabilities and take advantage of public cloud under certain circumstances? But when possible, whenever possible, you want to take advantage of your on-premises CDN. And so multi-CDN and some of these new multi-CDN switchers are really designed to put that intelligence and that logic around it so that you can set rules as to how you want to deliver content, and you can prioritize it and say, okay, when I start running out of capacity, maybe I burst capacity to a public CDN or several public CDNs. Or perhaps when I do that, I have a set of KPIs that I'm trying to meet on quality. So if I, for instance, burst capacity to Akamai and I'm not seeing the kind of quality that I expect out of Akamai, I can switch that stream actively to an alternate CDN. So that's the new multi-CDN is really about building this hybrid distribution framework so that you get ultimate flexibility as to how you want to deliver content day by day, moment by moment, based on the conditions, based on the costs, based on the quality, and other factors that may come into play. So maybe certain types of content you have the rights as well, rights issues, where you have to keep it on your private network versus other things you may have the flexibility to.
Okay. I mean, it sounds great. Is that something everybody should have, or what are the key considerations? Should I do it? Should I not do it? What's important?
Yeah, well, it really depends on what your strategy is. I mean, if your goal is to eventually migrate services into the cloud, the question is always how do you do it in a way that you're not going to create a risk point for the business, right? I mean, if you move all of your traffic into the cloud instantaneously and the cloud doesn't quite work for that, or the costs are very high, you're going to end up in trouble. So the CDN, our CDN broker and other kinds of CDN switching technologies are really designed to allow you to ease into cloud-based delivery, see what's going to happen, especially when you have some of these live events, the Olympics, World Cup soccer is coming up. Nobody really knows where exactly the spikes are going to be because
Thursday night football.
Yeah, well, exactly. But depending on which countries are going to be you may have a different kind of demand profile for things, and so that's where those types of CDN switching applications give you the flexibility to say, oh, I didn't plan for this, right? I didn't plan for that capacity, but I need to be able to support it and make sure customers are happy.
Okay. Would open caching, that's a topic that we hear in the news, and we've been talking in some panels about it as well. Is it part of multi-CDN? Is it complementary?
Yeah, potentially part of that. So open caching, for folks that aren't familiar, is basically a technology that allows different CDNs to communicate with each other. It was based on some CDN interconnect specs that were developed years ago. That never actually got implemented by many of the CDN providers. We implemented it in our system. Very few people actually looked to take CDNs and connect them together. And open caching was derived off of that because there's a logic to it in saying that if you have one CDN and you want to connect with another, how do you do it? There should be some sort of specification that defines how different CDNs communicate with each other. And the idea here is that for ISPs that are carrying third-party traffic, which today there's things like Netflix and Amazon Prime and
Disney.
Apple, Disney, all those kinds of things, that today, consumers don't realize it, right? They think they get their video over the top, but they really are getting it through it has to come through a high-speed data service at some point, whether it's a mobile service or a wireline service. And so the challenge, I think, for ISPs has been that as the traffic has increased, they're not participating in the business associated with that, right? It's just a cost to them, effectively, because they're just carrying more and more and more traffic. Open caching is designed to create a foundation of technology that allows ISPs to come in and say, hey, actually, I add value to that OTT traffic. I can deliver from within the ISP network and deliver a much better quality stream, a much better experience, and in theory, they can generate some revenue off of that by capturing wallet share from the public CDNs. So we're talking about multi-CDN and the relationship between it. Open caching is just another type of CDN, and so as open caching networks get enabled, multi-CDN switchers can tap into open caching networks to take advantage of them.
Okay, and is it really taking off? I know some discussions also with operators, some of the content providers are pushing for it. Do you see it getting a lot of traction?
I see a mix, being honest. So I see a lot of interest on the part of the ISPs in understanding the business model around it, which is still evolving, trying to sort out, like there's some investment involved in deploying an open caching network. You have to have servers in place. Somebody has to maintain that stuff, and that means that there has to be some return on that in order to justify it. And that can be challenging because the demand is just starting to build within the content side for that kind of stuff. So the thing that we advocate when we go out and talk with folks is that many people already have a pre-existing CDN in place. They can leverage existing capacity and existing whatever's left, right? They usually have some overhead on those systems to get started in that business because, that doesn't cost anything extra to go ahead and do that.
You might even make money.
Yes, and you can make some money on it, and we can develop the business for open caching that we believe will develop over time. But yeah, the economics are still being worked out to say, okay, is this a fully independent business that ISPs can look at and say, hey, I'm gonna be able to, build a business like the IPTV kind of business was historically in the past. That's still lots of discussions ongoing, and it's something that my company is trying to help broker some of those discussions to see, how do we flesh it out? How do we make it sort of a standard kind of a model that can be beneficial to the ISPs.
Okay. So, multi-CDN, I took notes. You said, okay, I have rules-based to switch. I assume that has a large analytics component.
Absolutely.
To get all the KPIs, as why, and time is easy. It's Monday this, Tuesday that one, but that's probably not the way it works. So,
right.
How advanced is the analytics that you need to do that efficiently? Right,
yeah, so analytics, when you look at efficiency, right? If you can't measure it, you can't manage it.
Yep.
And so the analytics is a core piece of this. We have a lot of customers historically that had run CDNs, and they really didn't know a lot about the customer. They didn't know how people were watching. They didn't know whether people were getting a high quality stream or a lower quality stream, and sometimes the analytics that they, if they did have analytics, they would get the information much later after, you really
it's too late.
Yeah, exactly. You couldn't really do anything about it. So the goal is to get information in as real time as you possibly can, and to make sure that you have as much information and that you can really drill down and understand it, and then beyond that to have the systems in place that could take advantage of it to guide some of the decision making for stuff like the CDN switching. So if you see quality issues in real time, you adjust and adapt to those, and you change. You change the way that you do things so that you can deliver a much better quality stream when you see degradation in quality. And this is how some of that, we talk about fault resilience and geo-redundancy and so on. Like, you got to detect it, right? When something bad happens, you got to detect it right away. and you got to be responsive to it in order to really deliver that light switch kind of reliability. And so the analytics themselves have to be very capable. And this is one of those applications when we talk about cloud, like absolutely, you know, that's the type of application that's ideal in the cloud, and you know, it can be run as like a SaaS-based kind of a service that is much easier to deploy and scale out.
And if I'm an operator and I want to do these analytics, is it something, it comes out of the box? Do I need to design, configure it? Do I need to have an analytics team myself, or something that the CDN vendor takes care of? How does it work?
So I mean, we have native packages that come along for the ride. So you know, sometimes it's the operations teams that want to see it. Other times it's like subscriber analytics or other sorts of pieces of information that might be valuable to different teams. And so you can get a pre-configured kind of a pack that comes in and it just connects into the various systems. Clearly, if there are some third-party systems, like if you want client-side analytics, you got clients in place and you want to tie into them, there's some integration associated with that. Or you can create your own, you know, so you have the flexibility to create your own kinds of analytics around the underlying data. But the idea is to be as flexible as possible. Like we can't pre-guess what people want to see in their data, and so you know, we don't try to lock it down. Yep. Just give a starter kit effectively for people so that they see what's possible.
Okay. So cloud is of course the topic. We mentioned it many times. How much of a driver or not a driver is it for the efficiency itself? It might help in some points, but there I also heard customers that went to the cloud and said, well, part of the stuff we're bringing back, right, because it doesn't work from, like I said, an economic perspective, or I don't get the quality depending on where I am and the geography.
Sure.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, I think we hear this from a lot of operators who say, hey, we're moving everything to the cloud. And when you sit down and start asking questions about the economics of that, what you find is that, you know, there hasn't been a lot of study oftentimes into the various applications and what's the economic impact of trying to move that stuff into the cloud. So there are certain kinds of things, you know, when you look at on-demand and aspects of the delivery frameworks, the origin frameworks and so on, you can move those things into the cloud and the economics make sense. Edge kinds of systems and so on. In terms of public cloud, probably a more difficult story, but what we are seeing is the development of edge cloud kinds of environments where those things are being built inside of operators' own networks, and the economics associated with that are substantially different. And it is really a very similar kind of a model. So some of the advantages of cloud tech for things like CDN are that you can get a lot more on-demand kind of deployment models, so that you don't actually have to spin up full capacity or have it, you know, sitting there waiting for traffic. You can spin it up based on demand. So you're much more eco-friendly from the sense that you're not consuming resources with that kind of technology. It's also easier just in terms of upgrades and other sorts of things for operators. If you want to do daytime upgrades, if you can support that kind of stuff, you can do continuous integration and deployment of technology. So, you know, there are just some fundamental advantages to some of the underpinnings for cloud technology that you may take advantage of on premises, and on your own hardware in your own facilities. And you can also run that same tech in the cloud to, again, get some of the flexibility that you get from the cloud when you need it. And you know, it's all time sensitive, right? If you only need it for a day or two, it could be expensive for a day or two, but it's totally worth it to do that in the cloud versus buying dedicated machines and keeping them active and running for months.
So you're basically running or most of the times, everything on-prem or everything in the cloud is not the right model. So you do a hybrid approach.
Correct, yeah.
So that's what you call, is that hybrid cloud?
Hybrid cloud, yeah. So hybrid cloud, it tends to be where we see the industry heading. Over time, obviously, we'll see more and more cloud and more edge cloud and so on. And from our perspective, it's a sliding scale, and it may be dependent on the types of traffic and the applications that you're running over the network as to where is the optimal place to run the traffic. And so we don't, predict in a sense how people are going to do that. The idea is you have a CDN software that's capable of running in all those environments, and then you have the intelligence layer that lets the operator decide, okay, how are we going to leverage all this? Whether it's a Velocix product or it's a third-party product, it could be multiple private CDNs, it could be public CDNs, it could be open caching CDNs. We don't really care at the end of the day. The point is, you're balancing the traffic across the ideal delivery mechanism to reach the customer and deliver the best experience.
Sounds easy. Is it easy, or are there some challenges?
No, always challenges. So, I mean, there are always integration points to deal with, and some of those we try to do those integrations. We got a big enough deployment footprint that we end up doing a lot of the integrations in advance with one customer or another, and people could take advantage of it. But there's always uniqueness within people's systems that you got to work through, and this is part of the experience of having been around, is knowing where the potential pitfalls are for those kinds of integrations, and then working through them. But it's it's just a matter of really writing it down and drawing it out and putting a plan around it, but fairly well understood.
Okay, so I want to hear from the audience. So who is moving stuff to the cloud already now? So just hands up. Who has some of the video delivery stuff in the cloud? Okay, not that many. Who is thinking about it to do it in the next 1, 2, 3 years? Okay, so still a way to go. This gentleman and a few others can surely help if you think that's the right journey for you eventually, but that's what we see. At least big tier 1 telcos are moving a lot of their video delivery stuff into the cloud. Absolutely. In various different models.
Yeah, and as I said, a lot of the cloud, so when you hear the term cloud technology, oftentimes we get from folks who, if you're a smaller operator, you're like, I'm not sure that I'm ready to do that. And you actually don't need to do that. You get to take advantage of the underlying cloud technology just to make your deployment more efficient in how it gets managed and upgraded and so on. But there are cost advantages and efficiencies that you can gain from the cloud technologies, even if you just maintain it fully on premises.
Okay. So there is no one-size-fits-all. It's always a consulting project in the beginning, understanding what the operator wants, or how does it work?
Yeah,
where do I start?
Typically, we usually start out, the problems sound very similar at operators when you first talk to people. Everybody's trying to get improved delivery, figure out an ad tech model, low latency, 4K, HEVC. These are all the things that people are wanting to deploy. What you find is that the integration environments are different, right? So they have different encoders, transcoders, different clients and players. Sometimes you have smart TVs in the mix, which adds a layer of complexity. So the devil's in the details, right? You got to get into it and really understand it. The advantage of working with somebody that's been, works with large operators, and you sort of come across these things as you deploy them, so it makes it easier where you've already gone through those pitfalls and taking care of those things before you don't have to do special integrations in all cases.
Yeah. You mentioned something in the sense it's advertising. When we think about CDNs, often we first think about stream a movie, stream a series. Mm-hmm. How does it apply to advertising, and is there any special things to take care of when I think about streaming ads?
Ads, the ad content itself they're similar formats that are being used for delivery, but with ads in particular, it depends on what type of ad models you're deploying. Mm-hmm. Typically you want, we're using SCTE triggers, so you have to have, the proper input into the systems. You need manifest manipulation kinds of platforms that are used to detect those triggers and communicate with the various ad platforms. And we advocate, today what we see from most people is they're trying to deploy parity with linear models and replace some like ad zone kind of deployment models on linear. But the longer term objective is to have full addressable advertising, which means that every individual consumer gets an ad that's targeted to their particular profile. And so the systems that get put in place, dynamic ad insertion platforms, are capable of doing that and using various information sources to guide the decision making. And ideally, if you can support a bidding kind of environment where you connect to multiple ad platforms to try to get the best price for the ad avails, that's the ideal environment at long term. And then really what happens when you look at the internet, TV's been a laggard a bit in that environment because the integration environment is fairly complex. That model, it's not new. It's not a new model, right? It's happening every time you get on the internet. You're getting targeted ads. Yep. As you can see, do a Google search and then
search for flights for Philadelphia. We'll see ads for the next 6 months.
That's right. That's right. So hopefully we can do it better on the TV side. But the point is that model is in place and well proven, and now it's a matter of implementing it within the TV environments.
Jim, you've seen the trailer. I think we've talked about it before. What if I gave you $100 million?
Yeah.
What would you do with it?
For
Velocix.
Oh, for Velocix. That's a very great question. I was headed to Bermuda. That was so for Velocix, I mean, I think from our perspective, we continue to invest in some of the areas that we're invested in. Also, when we look at that, we're in the business of growth, right? So we are actually part of a much bigger company, Lumen Group, that owns about 24 different companies in the media and communication space, and we continue to acquire companies in that space to broaden our portfolio. And so, we'd probably do both in terms of organic growth and inorganic kinds of growth activities focused around this. Streaming video is the market is continuing to rise. This area of efficiency is an area that's rich with new technologies and new opportunities. So we'd use the money to obviously
to grow.
Yeah, keep moving forward and trying to get stuff faster. I mean, what we feel in this industry and the biggest pressure that we get from our customers is the need to move swiftly because there's a lot of competition out there. Yep. And so that's something that we're acutely focused on, is how do we deliver things fast and make sure that we're hitting the mark with respect to the priorities that our customers have.
So it's also internal efficiency.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we have the same objectives.
Same challenges. Great, Jim. It was great to have you here. Thank you for the talk. Thank you, dear audience, to join us this early morning. We have 2 more sessions today, both focused on video. So if you want to hang around, the next one is at 10:20, I think. So see you there, or have a great day. Thank you, everybody.